techniques for the Titans. And as everyone populates the stream, I want to take this moment to say thank you for being here. We are very excited to have you all here, and it looks like people are now coming in and everything is working great. We are very, very happy to start our Back to School series with the Percussion Conservatory. My name is Joshua Vonderheide, and I am today's host and the founder of the Percussion Conservatory, which is a platform just for classical percussionists who are looking to pursue a career in classical percussion. And part of our Back to School series today is going to start off with an awesome shake, roll, and a bang with Mr. Pedro Fernandez, who is a percussionist with the Indianapolis and Chautauqua Symphonies. And he is also on faculty at Lone Star College and at the Chautauqua Music Festival. So for all you guys who are looking for a summer music program next year, you can go apply to hang out with Pedro, and he will be your faculty teacher. So I am thrilled, Pedro, to have you here today. It is an honor to have you. You and I go way back. You've been an inspiration of mine for, it's been over a decade now, when I thought I was a hotshot sophomore at Juilliard, and this guy put me in my place, guys. Pedro was the first one who truly humbled me. I was like, whoa, this guy can really, he can play the instruments. And at that time, he went off to Detroit. He was advancing at auditions when I very first met him, and ever since then, it's been nothing but up from there. And as I just mentioned, he's held positions with major orchestras and other ones that I didn't mention. He's played with Houston Ballet, he's played in the Cincinnati Symphony, and really all over the world, originally hailing from Panama, and now full-time living here in the States. So Pedro, thank you so much. We're very excited for your class and to learn all of your techniques for the Titans of tambourine. And let's go ahead and get started. Please take us away. How you doing?
Doing great. Good morning, everyone. Hope everybody's doing well, or good evening or afternoon, wherever you are in the world. And yeah, welcome to this class. Hope to show you a little bit of what I do in terms of the tambourine. And yeah, so essentially what I've tried to do here is to simplify as much as possible the techniques that I utilize, and try to make them, very digestible for everyone. This needs to be completely simplified. There needs to be no room for, second guessing what you're doing, or anything like that. So let's get started. I think we're all familiar with tambourines, right? Basically, this is a drum, right? Except it has little jingles all around, and it has a drum head. And sure, you could potentially play with sticks. Normally, in the classical world, we use our hand, and there are all sorts of amazing techniques that we can utilize to play this instrument. This instrument has variations all over the world, from the pandeiro in Brazil, the reek in the Middle East, and all sorts of other different instruments that essentially are a drum with a jingle. So yeah, let's get started. Usually, one disclaimer I have to make is that I don't believe that any single brand can provide you with every single sound that you need. So while people are endorsed by different companies, it is okay to branch away and try different instruments and see what's out there. If you have a good relationship with your company, perhaps they might take your advice or your thoughts about a particular instrument or a particular sound you're looking for. And if you're a student, well, just make sure that you are exposed to as many different sounds as possible. Here today I have a few tambourines from different brands. I have a Harlan with oversized silver jingles, Grover with the heat-treated silver jingles, Black Swamp with Chromium 25, another Black Swamp with silver and chromium, a tambourine by Jeff Luft with I believe this is bronze and silver. I have this Frankenstein tambourine here, an 8-inch with these steel jingles, and these brass jingles that I actually combined this drum on my own out of also a Meinl. I believe it's a dry studio tambourine. They have the brass, which is what this is, and they have also a silver one or a steel one. I've bought all sorts of tambourines off eBay, or there's so many good instruments out there. We'll get to this later, but people always have the question of what do you use for to create friction when you're playing your rolls, your finger rolls, and there's also all sorts of waxes or sandpaper or all sorts of things. I use a crayon. Easy. It's not too sticky. It's not gonna dirty your instrument. I believe all colors work the same as well. So yes, crayon. It is wax. And I believe I got that idea the first time I heard of using a crayon was from Dinesh Joseph up in Buffalo with the Buffalo Philharmonic and the owner of Dragonfly Percussion. So, and it's really worked well for me. Okay, now let's get directly into this, into the techniques here. So, very basic. How do you hold this instrument? One common denominator about the tambourine is that they're all going to have a space without jingles. That's where you want to put your hand. This the hole they have here, I think that came mainly from the Spaniard tradition up in the I believe northeastern part of Spain, the Basque country, Tambor de Basque. But really, for our purposes, we don't necessarily use that. It's not like I don't put any finger through there or anything, but do hold the tambourine on that space. I keep my thumb, basically relaxed, rather straight. I hold this part here with, essentially right on the place where the palm of my hand meets my fingers, and yeah, just wrap my hand around it, and it's hold it pretty loosely. If you tighten that drum, that hand up, once you start playing, it's gonna sound a little choked, and you don't necessarily want that. So I hold it very loosely, just with enough tension, I guess, that I'm not gonna let the instrument fall, but or drop it or anything, but loose enough that the instrument can speak. Cool. So sometimes I also tend to add or subtract fingers from the bottom of the drum, depending on the dynamics that I'm using, on the techniques that I'm utilizing. You could probably see here that I have a little bit of, something here to dampen the instrument. I do that essentially with all my drums, with all my tambourines, and it's on a case-by-case basis as well. It's not that I have a default, let's put a piece of moleskin here, all the same size, all the same diameter, whatever, and just stick it in the back of the tambourine, or let's put, whatever other setup you have to muffle the instrument. I go on a case-by-case basis, and I try to utilize either a piece of cloth or some sort of, soft material uh, if I do use moleskin, I actually use the soft side touching the drum head as opposed to the adhesive side. And I try to go from bigger to smaller, because obviously then if you cut a small piece, you can't make it big by, you know, magic or anything like that. So anyway, go from big, and if I feel that it's too much muffling, I keep cutting until I just find just enough to get rid of unwanted rings and overtones in the drum, but not to completely deaden that sound. Um, cool. So, and then that's why I keep also utilizing my fingers as an additional means of muffling that. So you can still hear a little bit of that, but not a whole lot. Cool. So let's see. Um, Basic playing. Um, let's call this guy a Pac-Man with an overbite, right? So I basically use my fingers in a very relaxed manner. I use mostly my wrists as well. This would be a forte uh, approach to the tambourine, and my general playing area is gonna be directly opposite to where I hold the instrument. So right here is where I would usually play, my go-to area, basically halfway between the edge of the tambourine and the center. So yeah, right around here is my general playing area. Um, let's see. Usually, if I'm playing a little softer, then I'm also gonna take fingers of this Pac-Man guy and go a little bit more towards it's the 3 o'clock really. If you're looking at the tambourine this way, and this is 12, it's more towards, really towards 2 or something. And then I tend to go a little towards the edge of the tambourine. Generally, you want to keep the tambourine at an angle as well. I know this is very basic for perhaps for some of the attendees that are a little more advanced, but bear with me. So yeah, like I was saying, a little towards the edge, more towards that 2 o'clock for soft playing, and then just use essentially one finger if it's at the softest dynamics. Um, the good thing about utilizing this technique is that if you have to do a finger roll, it's essentially the same thing you're gonna use. So there's no real change from one technique to the other in that aspect. Unless, of course, you're utilizing your thumb, which I do. We'll go excuse me. We'll get into that later. For loud passages, I will close my fist, right? And try to use this part of my fingers, not the knuckles, not this part. I'm not punching the drum. I'm just playing with this kind of technique, and I want to use then this. It covers more surface. I try to think of this as like for those of you who may be familiar, somewhat familiar with hand drumming technique with conga specifically. When you play a conga drum and you want a full tone, you basically have your fingers closed, right? And you play with this area, this entire area of your fingers in the palm. But when you want to play a slap, you open your fingers a little bit and play with the fingertips. So all these different techniques, if I open my fingers like that and play, it's gonna create a different kind of sound, more like slappy kind of sound, which may be appropriate for some circumstances, but not necessarily always. Well, not always, obviously. But I do use an open hand very seldom, very seldom. But yeah, there's instances in which that is appropriate. My first go-to, if I really want to have that pop from the drum head and all that, would be that fist. And then in that case, I also move closer towards the middle of the drum. So fast passages. You know, before we talk about fast passages and we're talking about these basic techniques, I think we can start applying that. And the excerpt to demonstrate that precisely, it's the Aragonese by George Bizet, right, from Carmen. And if you're not familiar with it, basically it's you have a 3/8, right, and you have eighth note, 2/16, and an eighth note, da, 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 and then the following measure is 3/8 notes. So it's in a 2-bar motive, and it keeps, you know, that same thing going and going and going. So let me adjust the volume here so that I can demonstrate that passage real quick. All right, so short and sweet, all nice. Let me turn the volume back up. I was saying short, sweet, very nice. One of the things that I used or that I was doing was changing dynamics. And when I got to the softest dynamic, you notice that I basically placed that tambourine against my leg as a means of support here, and then I was using 2 fingers right towards the edge, once again on that sort of, you know, going off that 12 o'clock part, and then, you know, having that support from your leg really clarifies that sound, really makes that, you know, speak in a very articulate way, and it's creates more consistency as well as you're playing.
Hey, Pedro. I'm sorry.
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Josh here, guys. Would you mind ever so slightly moving your microphone either like down or maybe slightly to the right? Because actually, we want to see the soft tambourine playing, and the microphone's slightly covering your hand.
Of course.
Yeah. Thank you so much, man.
No problem. So let me actually just get a little farther away. Yeah, here you go. So I was doing a couple of things during that soft section. Number one, if you paid close attention, I was also traveling a little bit with my hand, right? I find that in my playing that helps with faster notes. Now, this particular excerpt was one in which I had so many problems before. I really got into my head, and it was almost like it was mentally blocked from being able to play that. Until precisely Jeff Luft was the one who first mentioned this to me. He's like, well, you can just go and practice some stick control just with the tambourine. And at the time, I didn't ask him for any specifics on how to do that. But basically, I've created my own way of approaching that stick control to serve these purposes. I hope everybody here is familiar with stick control. If you're not, then you should be. It's almost like brushing your teeth for percussion. So let's see. Also hope everybody brushes their teeth. Cool. So we have the very first page of stick control. I think most of us are familiar with that. And it starts with single strokes, right? Right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left. and then goes on to left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right. It goes to doubles, right, right, left, left, right, left, left, the opposite, left, left, right, right. Then goes to paradiddles and so on. So really what I do is, I have the metronome going, and I just choose a hand. If I want to play all the right hand notes, then I just ignore the left hand notes. So, which means the first exercise would just be literally, I'll play it loud first. Once you get to exercise number 9, which it has the 3 notes, you are using exactly the technique that you need for Carmen. It's 3 notes in a row. So it's just a matter of then increasing that tempo in your metronome little by little, and getting your facility with that, getting ease of use for that technique. And obviously, different tempi, like I already mentioned, different dynamics. It's really, really paramount that you utilize different dynamics when playing stick control. Not only like, okay, I'm going to play loud, I'm going to play mezzo forte, I'm going to play soft. Also do crescendos, do diminuendos, do tier dynamics. So subito piano, subito forte, subito mezzo piano, and to really acquire that control. That's why the name is stick control, right? In this case, I guess hand control. We'll talk a little bit more about stick control a little later for another technique. But for now, yeah, so one thing that you have to do as well when playing this excerpt, especially in an audition, is plan ahead. When do you want exactly to put your tambourine down on your leg to start playing that piano section? It's, that's personal choice, honestly, but you have to plan it. When you show up, especially to an audition, you need to have all these things already sorted out. You can't really get there to try to improvise. That's just not the smartest way of going around it. So I'll talk a little bit more about that in a different in the Dvorak. But anyway, a little tangent here is that one of the weirdest comments I ever got in an audition was that after playing that Aragonese excerpt, it was a final round, the conductor from behind a screen requested if I could play that excerpt more Spanish. It's just one of those things that you sometimes get comments that you're supposed to interpret. It's so vague, so ambiguous. Like, more Spanish? What do you mean? Do I didn't bring any paella with me, or I don't know. So most likely what he really meant was to stylize it a little bit. So what do I mean by stylize it? Wait just ever so slightly to play the 16th notes, so it's not gonna be exactly in time, right? So I'm exaggerating it now for the purpose of clarity, but it has to be a little bit. Even though you listen to recordings, you play it in the orchestra, and really that's not happening. But when you're by yourself, that's one of these things that are different in an audition than playing in an ensemble. There's a number of those. It's not everything. A lot of excerpts you play is essentially, once you are playing them with the orchestra, it's gonna be exactly how you do it in your regular practice for an audition. But some things, like for example, this one is an example that might be slightly different. Also, if you're playing it with the orchestra, you have to make sure to lead the ensemble. If you wait to hear that the rest of the ensemble is doing, you will be late, and you'll be about an eighth note late. This is true for so many excerpts, so many things that you lead in different instruments. Snare drum, the wood block, for example, in Short Ride in a Fast Machine by Adams. Once you start banging, people are listening to you. You're not listening to people. So people are going to latch onto you. You have to trust the rest of the ensemble to do that. So, sure, a lot of times in the orchestra, time is negotiable. Let's put it that way. So there will be instances in which, yeah, sure, you might wanna, okay, I'm getting a little ahead. I feel like I'm getting ahead, or whatever. Also, the ensemble is getting behind, rather. Whatever the case is, it's that flexibility, that negotiation that goes on with time in a live setting. So anyhow, back to the most basic of techniques, which is just how you strike the instrument. That's basically about it for that. Moving on a little bit, we have rolls now. So rolls, we all know that is the way for percussions to play a continuous sound. In a tambourine, we have a couple of possibilities. We can do a shake roll, we can do a finger roll, like I mentioned before. So let's talk about the finger roll first. Like I said earlier, in order to create friction with my fingers, I utilize a crayon. For a long time, I experimented with different types of waxes. I've used the sandpaper, which I absolutely dislike. I apologize to those who do like it. It's fine, whatever works for you, whatever works for me. I'm just talking about things that work for me in this particular case. So, for a demonstration on expert finger roll technique, you should check out some Pandero videos. Those guys are just ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. For classical music purposes, playing in the orchestra, basically I play my finger roll with either my thumb or with the middle finger. The similarities in these techniques is that my fingers, the finger that I'm playing the roll with, has to be basically straight, right? Either the thumb like this, even though, yeah, sure, there's a natural curvature of the thumb, but you know what I mean. Or this finger needs to be completely straight. Also, you have a little bit of support there, right? I'm not gonna play like this. I wanna have that little support here. Sorry, again, I'm not gonna play just like that. It's gonna be inconsistent for me. So I have that support here provided by my thumb. Boom. Makes it a little easier. I use that particularly when I have softer rolls, a thinner texture in the orchestra. If I have a thicker texture or I want a fortissimo forte roll, then I use my thumb. It covers more surface, so it's gonna, recreate that sound a little better. Cool. So the keys here with using the thumbs are to not apply too much pressure. You have to find the sweet spot, but I would say it's definitely not, you're not pressing hard into that drum. If you do that, you're just, well, first of all, creating additional tension that's unnecessary, and second, yeah, just essentially deadening that drum head. So very light touch here, and you have to trust that the instrument's going to speak up. So let's see. Yes. So one important thing I haven't mentioned is the direction in which you apply that wax or that crayon. I try to do it, in this manner, is perpendicular to the direction in which my finger's gonna travel. I believe that this is not scientific, but I believe that creates even additional friction, because you're traveling across the wax that film of wax that you just left on the drum, as opposed to traveling with it in a parallel manner. Perfect. I think that's essentially about it for these finger rolls. Now, rolls generally have a beginning, right? They have a release as well. It's a matter of practicing both with both fingers, um, especially if you're playing soft. Generally, what I do is play, boom, and my release then is like a quick. It's a quick release here with my index finger. If I'm playing a little louder with that same finger, then my release is gonna be with the palm in this way, right? Especially good for crescendos, for a release with an accent, that kind of thing. I also believe that since I'm playing generally a little softer with this finger, that release with an accent, it's gonna be closer to the edge of the drum, right? So the sound is not all that different from a general sound that you get from playing my general playing area. As far as the finger with the thumb goes, then the release will be more like this. So a rotation motion, almost like what you do with Stevens, or well, any 4-mallet grip in marimba. So that kind of thing, right? So you're playing your finger roll and just rotate the hand over, and again play with this part of the palm. Other ways of doing roll releases are when you have loud excerpts, really quick excerpts. Petrushka comes to mind. Also, the Dvorak Carnival Overture. I then release that onto my leg in this manner. Here. Cool. And first, let's talk about the release on the finger rolls. And for that excerpt, I've prepared Danse Bohème by Bizet, also from the Carmen. And I tend to use this little tambourine in auditions. I think it sounds great by itself, that sort of darker character that it gets from these brass jingles. But through a few trials and errors, I found that it really sounds like trash with the orchestra. It doesn't sound very good with the orchestra. It sounds great by itself, but it just doesn't complement the orchestra. If I'm playing this with an ensemble, I'll use, I have that 8-inch Grover tambourine, the heat-treated silver as well. And I feel that works really fantastic. It's a more actual true sound for that. Great drum to have. So anyway, Carmen. So obviously, I've taken care of, having that I know I have enough wax on my tambourine to create the fiction that I need, and I've taken care of practicing my finger rolls and the release. That's really important with these excerpts, and any soft excerpt like that. Another little thing that I have to mention for these soft playing and soft rolls like that is that I actually use my left hand a lot in this manner. When I'm playing especially a long roll like that, I like to help my right hand by using my left hand as well. So as you can see, I hope you can appreciate that you're able to tell that I'm using my left hand a little bit. And It's also helpful when you have accents and you don't necessarily want to change the way in which you're playing. Essentially, I'm bringing the left hand into my right hand a little bit. That was just the beginning of that Breton 4C interludes, which since then since I played auditions or gotten jobs, I've gotten to play a couple times with the orchestra. It's a fun excerpt, and one of the other things about that one is that it is easier with the orchestra because you can play louder. So anyhow, yes, I also use my left hand, basically control my accent with that left hand. Cool. Speaking now particularly of Dvorak's Carnival Overture, I'm going to use a different tambourine for that now. Let's see. Where did I put that other black swamp? I have no idea. Oh well. Here it is. When you have that Dvorak excerpt, let's talk about letter Q, which is essentially the recapitulation, right? No, sorry. I need to talk about the beginning, because after that first ending, after that second ending, excuse me, there's a roll that is marked as a diminuendo. I'm trying to find the excerpt here. Here it is. So there's a roll, it's marked forte, diminuendo, the third beat is piano. The way I approach that, once again, finger roll. In this case, I use my thumb. It's a bigger sound once again. The release, like I spoke earlier, is gonna be on my leg, and all I'm doing is essentially pushing that tambourine, the tambourine with my thumb, letting it fall into my leg for a clean release, like this. Let me turn down the microphone a little bit. Starting a couple bars earlier than that would be, right? So basically, I push at the very end that tambourine into my leg for a clean release, and that leaves the tambourine then set up for the soft playing that comes after that, right? A little farther this way so that you can all see.
Pedro, that's really great. Could you show us when you're playing those soft notes? I'd love to know exactly like which finger you're using, and if you're just the grip and really a close up of your grip for those soft notes.
Okay, the grip is like this currently, right? So I have only my middle finger on the back of the tambourine, holding it very loosely, just like I spoke before, and I'm using these two fingers to play those notes. If I found that my sweet spot, if I use one finger, it's gonna be it's gonna be inconsistent, and using the entire hand, it's just gonna be too loud. So these two fingers provide enough for me to have a piano dynamic that is consistent and that is defined.
Awesome. Thanks for clarifying that, man.
Absolutely. So once again, here. I guess the fingers are in this position. I don't really know why, but that's just the way I do it, I guess. So the excerpt that I wanted to talk about, really mainly in this in the Carnival Overture, was the letter Q. And we're gonna talk about now another technique. So for fast passages, for fast loud passages, I tend to keep my tambourine in this same angle, right, in the same way in which my general playing is, but then bring it down to my leg. Let me adjust the microphone once again. Adjust that keep that same angle, right, that I utilize to play for my general playing. Bring the tambourine down to my leg, and the other stroke, you know, if it's, for example, a figure that is 16th notes, continuous 16th notes, the second and fourth 16th note in a quarter note, right, within a quarter note, are gonna be on my leg, right? One. Sorry, so it might be a little too loud. So something that's very important here, that is one of the lackings that I see a lot with students, is that they don't use, or we don't use we forget about that left hand. I already talked about utilizing that left hand for the rolls. It's really important to keep that left hand active for this technique. You have to be as active bringing that tambourine down to your knee. Also, it can't be, for these passages, the drum can be up here in your leg, on your leg, or on another soft spot. It has to be closer to your knee. It does hurt, yes. You know, if anybody else finds a different way of doing it in which the sound is going to be as consistent, please let me know, because I haven't found it. When you're preparing for an audition, for example, that you practice weeks after weeks after weeks, I try to change the spot so that my bruises are not, you know, so that I'm not killing my leg, killing my knee. So, and I might, practice with on my leg. No problem with that, as far as it's only for practicing purposes. If I'm gonna play a mock audition or in the real audition, you have to use your knee for that consistency of sound. So, and like I said, be really active about that, about bringing the tambourine down to your knee. To practice this, I once again use stick control. You move on to page, it's lesson 8. Not lesson 8, sorry. I'm thinking about a different book. Page 16, flam beats. And I basically ignore the flams, but I will go on. I will go on and practice all those rhythms from page 16, page 17 as well, because it has a different rhythm in the second measure. And then switch it up, because, well, in the book it's not necessarily written this way, but another common mistake that I find in, or lacking that I find in younger students, or that some young professionals as well, is that rhythm, when you play it fast, it tends to open up and sound more like almost swung or something, or like more like a triplet. So you have to make sure to be true to the rhythm that's written. So anyway, having said all this, I'm gonna demonstrate a little bit of the letter Q at Carnival Overture by Dvorak, and then go on to explain some of the things that I haven't talked about that I do here. So this time around, the rhythm wasn't too continuous, right? So basically on the 17th bar, I believe it is, I have just one measure, ta ta da. It needs to be really active. On the eighth notes, I see staccato marking, so very important for that to come through very clearly. And then, you set up your tambourine on your leg to play the rest of that passage. I leave this opening over here, right, not directly on my leg, so that I can just pick the tambourine up, right, and be ready in position to play, right? I won't be out of position. And then after letter R, 1, 2, 3, 4, the fifth bar of R, you have that same figure, but now it is a crescendo. One thing that is also very important with this technique is to be able to manipulate the dynamics that that you use by playing that. So I feel that mezzo forte is a good dynamic to start using that technique, that hand to knee here, and below that I tend to just use hand to hand here for fast playing, right? Supporting the tambourine on my leg, and then choosing a spot over a jingle to play in that way. Again, 2 fingers. In those particular 2 measures, the very first measure is piano. Now, at some point, I want to finish my crescendo at a forte. So I have to at some point switch dynamics to go hand to knee. I have to transition to get there. So like I said, the first figure, second figure, and then doing it at the real time, at the real tempo would be. The second figure is always the most difficult one. It has that same type of figure, ta-ta-ta, than the Aragonese in Bizet, Carmen. But it's a little faster, but you only have to do it once. So it's yet another reason to have that technique really down and be able to play cleanly for this passage. This passage took me so long to figure out. It's one of the most difficult passages I've encountered, and it sounds silly because it's just 2 measures of that, but to make it really sound consistent, really make it sound good, really make it sound there's no doubt in the committee. It's like, oh, that was clean, that was great, that's what I see here on the page. You really need to put in the time and to make it consistent every time, obviously. Another passage here that has that kind of technique is that if we move over to the Nutcracker, the passage that I wanted to talk specifically about was in this is the 4th scene of the first act. As you may or may not know, the first job that I won was with the Houston Ballet Orchestra, ballet. So the Nutcracker was, bread and butter. And precisely, usually the part that I played was tambourine. And this scene was in the audition as well. And it's very tricky for those of you who have not seen it before. I'm just going to show it. I apologize, I actually don't have that to screen shares or anything like that. But here it is. After 43, you get the idea, right? So it basically is the same 8 bars that repeat, that you play them twice. The first time piano, and the crescendo finishes at a forte. The second time, right at 44, starts mezzo forte and finishes fortissimo with an accent. For the first iteration of that motive there, of that phrase, I because it's only mezzo forte to forte, I don't want to reach the roll at a forte dynamic. The forte appears one measure before 44 in the middle of the roll. So for that passage, I'm gonna start using for that first phrase, I'm gonna keep using that technique. For the second phrase is that I use, let me lower the volume and demonstrate that passage real quick. Cool. So, like I mentioned earlier, the yes, we need to be able to start playing those 16th notes at a mezzo forte dynamic, and we need to be able to start playing that figure at a mezzo forte dynamic, right? As you can tell, also this, or you could see earlier, in this passage the figure is not that that, but it's that, which is why I mentioned practicing that, switching that rhythm around on stick control to be able to get that consistency of that rhythm. And the way you get that clarity is precisely by using that left hand to bring that tambourine, the shell of the tambourine, onto your knee, onto the boniest part you can find on your knee, for that clarity. For the first phrase, it's basically just really making sure that you're digging in, not being shy. One of these things that I also want to mention is, if you're taking an audition, you need to demonstrate that you know how to play these excerpts. There needs to be no doubt to the committee. So you need to play with a certain authority. You need to have your phrasing sorted out. You need to have your ideas all sorted out. And also, when I talk about your phrasing and your ideas, it's not like you're going to come up with a new way of playing excerpts. Excerpts have been played, or music has been played in a certain way for years and years and years. And it's not our job to change the way anything is played in terms of, oh, I discovered this phrase. No. It's about honoring what's on the page, but demonstrating that you know how it goes, right? So anyway, just wanted to make that point. Another technique that I've been using here is the other kind of roll, the shake roll. And basically, we've all encountered the shake rolls, and there's all sorts of ways of doing shake rolls. What I like to do is a combination of a rotation movement in this manner, right? The regular shake, and this motion as well. A little loud here. This motion comes from my arm. This motion comes from my wrist. And the idea is that you practice going back and forth between those very slowly, then progressively getting quicker, until you can actually combine both of them and achieve a result sort of like this. I feel like that sounds very much like a continuous roll. It's not interrupted. It's not taka 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 taka. You don't hear like a rhythm. So it really has served my purposes well in the way I hear the instrument. So that's the way I approach that excerpt. In this same scene in the Nutcracker, the same phrase basically repeats at the very end. Also, I hope you could all see that for the accent, I did use my fist at the very end. At the end of that movement, honestly, it's sort of the same phrase, even louder. The very end is fortissimo, and it has a sforzando with an accent. So even more reason to utilize that special effect of that fist onto the drum head. I see there's a question here. I apologize I haven't stopped at all to answer questions or anything like that. So would this be a good moment to perhaps make a
Uh,
A little pause.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, we can definitely answer this question. Let me go ahead and ask it so that our Facebook streamers can hear the question. And the question is to Mr. Pedro Fernandez: what should we keep in mind when we head out to buy a tambourine? And and you can go, one step further in this question, and because I think reading into it, there's a little bit of you just demonstrated that you have like 6 or 7 tambourines there. So maybe you can also talk about not only what to look for when buying a tambourine, but specifically also your first tambourine. Maybe a good first instrument, or one or two first instruments that are going to cover the bases for everything.
Of course, yeah. So essentially, for your first tambourine, I would say get something that is middle of the road. You don't want something that's too wet. You don't want something that is a strange sound. Silver is basically a very standard sound for tambourine, or copper as well, a little darker. Uh, so that comes down to personal preference, but it has to be sort of middle of the road. My first tambourine ever, which I bought roughly a little over 20 years ago, I guess, was precisely this tambourine, which is why it doesn't have the original head anymore. And yeah, it is a black swamp with silver and chromium 25. So the silver is more, I guess, a wetter sound, right? It has, it's not as articulate. That chromium, then half the jingles are chromium, and that really creates that crunch. It really brings that articulation, and it has essentially the best of both worlds. So it's a tambourine that serves a lot of general purposes, and as you can tell, I really prefer that silver sound. It's personal preference once again, and this is subjective. But most of my tambourines have are either silver or a combination of silver with something else.
Awesome. And I think that when I went to go get my first tambourine, I think one of the things that I didn't know that I was that I was trying to think about, or that I wish I would have thought about, was the difference of my practice room versus when I was actually going to use that instrument. And what I have found is that it's very easy to try to accidentally pick an instrument that sounds maybe too wet as your first instrument, because it's you go to play the tambourine, and you want something that's just like and it's just ringing and it sounds amazing, and then you do a roll, and the tambourines that are more wet are easier to roll on because the sustain is ringing longer, like you're saying with the silver. They're very bright and they ring a long time. And don't I would just say, to add to that for everyone, don't be afraid to if you hit the tambourine and it feels dry, that's going to probably help you in a lot of different situations. So like Pedro just said, I think that's great advice. Don't feel afraid of the standard, just solid chromium jingle. It might be jarring at first when you're thinking about playing it by yourself, but as soon as you go to the orchestra, as soon as you're playing in the hall, you're going to love the fact that you have all that articulation available to you. And while Pedro is on this, guys, do we have... Oh, we do have... This is fantastic. We have another question for you, Pedro. It's a long one. Let me read it for you. The question is, how do we choose a suitable tambourine for different repertoire? Is it okay to use inexpensive tambourines with a head, like a practice head for a student by Remo? And in addition, what should we practice to have a consistent left-hand shake roll? And lastly, this is 3 questions. How should we balance our practice time for all accessory percussion? So the first question is suitable tambourine for different repertoire. Second question is, actually it's 4 questions. Second question is, I love it. Second question is, type of head. The third question is shake roll. How do we get a consistent shake roll? And fourth is, how do we balance our accessory practice time?
All right, I'm gonna answer them in the opposite order.
Okay.
So I like to base my practice routine on my weakest points. Generally, when I start a practice session after my warm up, a short warm up, I do play something I'm very comfortable with, just to get into the instrument, whether it be snare drum, marimba, or whatever it is that I'm practicing. Something I'm familiar with. Okay, I get the feel for that instrument today. Perfect, no problem. And then I dedicate most of my practice time, progressively into the things that I'm more uncomfortable with first, and then going progressively into the things that I'm more comfortable, uh, dedicating perhaps a little less time on those, because we all love hearing ourselves sound good, but if you only practice those things that you sound good on, then you're not gonna reach that consistency. So it's definitely, when you're fresh in the morning or at the beginning of your practice session, is the best time to go for those things that you are not as comfortable with.
Yeah,
And
that's you're so
yeah,
on the money. You're so right, Pedro. I'm so glad you said that. And do you mind, as you keep answering these questions, to reboost your microphone,
of
to
course.
make sure we can all hear you.
There we go.
Yeah, perfect. All right, please continue. This is good stuff.
Yeah. So now, as far as how much time you dedicate, it's a matter of how much time do you have on a particular day to practice, or how much have you allotted in a particular day. How many hours, how many minutes do you have? Only 1 hour. And how many things, how many pieces, how many excerpts do you have to practice? So make sure that you get to everything you need to. Keep a timer to, that not only keeps you on schedule, but I find that personally, if I have a timer, I try to be as efficient as possible with that time that I allow myself, and that yields to better results, faster results a lot of times too, because I'm so focused on one thing. So and then when the timer hits, even if you feel that you're not done, it's time to move on to whatever else, because you need to be able to cover these things and not go over your time, because you may have errands, you may have to go to work, you may have to take a phone call, you may have whatever else you have to do. So it is just stay on task, right? Now, practicing your shake roll. Yeah, it was precisely what I was talking about earlier. Essentially, I'm gonna use a smaller drum for sound purposes. Yeah. So really, I think of eighth notes when I'm practicing this roll, right? And I set my metronome around 80, perhaps, something like that. I think that's probably a little over 80. That's all right. And so going back and forth between all these different figures that that you find, and that's one way of really getting comfortable with different velocities in the rotation of your hand. The same thing is true then when, like I said earlier, I'm practicing this rotation movement and this other one. So when you go back and forth, you do it in both, for both figures. When you're playing slow, those figures are not necessarily going to be really even. In terms of the tambourine, it's even. It's easier to get that evenness as you're playing faster, and that is okay. You're never going to play a slow roll on tambourine, so it's not like you have to make sure that it's perfectly even with the metronome for my slow eighth notes at 80. It's okay if it's not. What needs to be more consistent is the 16th, the sextuplets, the 32nd notes. That's what you're gonna focus on. Don't take this advice for your snare drum. You have to be able to play even eighth notes at 80. So a little parenthesis here. This is a book that was recommended to me. I know I have it, I think, right here. About a year ago, this book was recommended to me. Marked Giliana, I believe is the way you pronounce that name, and it's called Exploring Your Creativity on the Drum Set. Sure, it is a drum set book, but the very first lesson talks about rhythmic placement, and it is absolutely spectacular. I mean, especially when you're playing soft, he talks about the rate here of different figures, right? And the space that you can, how much space do you leave, even though these figures are, within one beat, the visual of how much space you leave between these notes is amazing. And then you go on to practice what he calls this loop, right? From eighth notes to triplets to 16th notes, back to triplets, back to eighth notes. Let's see. Going from two measures in the very first exercise to one measure to in between those figures to two beats to one beat. And then the creative part is that then you create your own etudes, right? Now, obviously, playing the full figures, sure, it's the idea is to be able to play all those full figures, but also to, for example, play the first two figures of each. So, eighth notes, play two eighth notes, play the first two triplets, play the first two 16th notes. The slower you do it, the more difficult it is. And then go on to leaving space. So you have only 16th notes and then one 16th note with an accent. On the next exercise, you have only the accented note. Everything else is a rest. And it really works well on, in terms of learning how to place notes. So it's a book I recommend. Let's see. I'm gonna put that over here. And we're gonna go on here to, let's see. I had.
So guys, as Pedro is gathering his stuff there and getting on to these last questions, I do want to briefly interrupt him for one little announcement. That is that Pedro is bringing us all pretty massive value in this class. He's demonstrating excerpts. He's showing us performance techniques, giving us all the tools that we need to succeed and adding a lot of value. I hope you're getting a lot of value for your education in this. And part of our mission as part of the Percussion Conservatory is to do just that. We want to make all of this percussion education as accessible and affordable as we can for everyone around the world. And we have a lot of these masterclasses that we're hoping to put on between now and the end of the year. And we also have a lot of content projects that are going to be coming through the website. And all of these are possible. So far, everything has been possible just because of your donations. And so if you're not able to donate for this class, that is totally okay. Again, this is part of our mission to make these classes free for all of you guys. But if you do have the capability to make a contribution towards our masterclass series, towards this back to school series, so that we can continue hiring these incredible artists like Pedro to do these classes, it would really mean the world to me and to the Percussion Conservatory and to all the students who are learning from us. If you do have that capability to make a contribution, I'm dropping the link right there in the chat. It's www.linktr.ee/the PC. And that link is also in our Instagram bio. It's in the post on this Facebook live stream. You can find it on many of our posts, all the posts that are going out and the emails that have been going out about this back to school series. All have this link so that you can securely donate. It's very easy. It all happens through PayPal, and 100% of your donation will exclusively be used to hire artists to put on these free master classes to advance education in the classical percussion community, and we record them so that they're available on demand afterwards. So thank you guys so much for being here. And again, it really means the world to me how much support we've had. And Pedro, it means the world to me that you're putting on this class for us and that you're helping us with our mission. It's been an incredible experience so far, and I I wanted to make sure we got that in before, before we get to the tail end of the class here. So thank you guys for listening, and thank you for the contributions that have already come in. And I really look forward to the entire series and seeing the culmination of it. But that's for another time. For right now, let's keep going with this awesome Q&A that's happening with Pedro. Guys, please keep putting in your questions in the Q&A because Pedro's here. This is the time to ask. Get all the information, every question you've ever wanted to ask about tambourine or percussion. He's world class at like 40 instruments. So please ask Pedro, about tambourine. That's fantastic. But if you do have questions, let's keep them coming. All right. Thank you guys so much. Back to you, Pedro.
Yeah, thank you, Josh. And that I just have two more points that I wanted to touch base upon with regarding the tambourine. The first one is one of the most difficult techniques here, or time consuming really, if you want to change the way you think about music instead of difficult, just it takes a little longer, is that playing crescendos and diminuendos while executing a shake roll. This comes up in pieces in the rep. Daphne and Chloe comes to mind as one that has a lot of diminuendos on the tambourine, and it is so difficult to do. That's another reason why, like I said earlier, you need to practice all these techniques at different dynamics. Crescendos, you use a crescendo for, we use a crescendo for the Dvorak Carnival Overture as well, right in that first section, right? So being able to manipulate those dynamics while playing a shake roll it's such a great trick to have, or a great technique to have. So essentially what I do once again is try to combine that my go-to roll that I explained already. As I'm getting softer, one of the things that I'm doing is changing my hand over, changing the tambourine over. Instead of my tambourine facing upwards, as I'm getting softer, it's going to face downwards now. And the technique for my roll changes from that less of a rotation of a roll to more of this back and forth. And yes, like Josh said earlier, it is far easier for these techniques if you have a tambourine that has a longer sustain, just to smooth it out. But I wanted to demonstrate a little bit of that diminuendo first and then a crescendo. The crescendo, I'll just demonstrate Carnival Overture one more time, but the beginning instead of letter Q. So let me adjust the volume here. Diminuendo. It wasn't necessarily the smoothest, but you get the idea. You get that transition. I find that as I'm switching the angle of the drum, I can keep playing about the same dynamic, and it's already gonna be a little softer. So, and then from there, try to transition as smoothly as possible to doing the back and forth arm technique rather than the shake. I'll do it once more. And something to keep in mind is also, or rather, one more thing that I do as I'm diminuendoing, I'm trying to grab my tambourine with less surface. So I actually let essentially all my fingers off the shell, and I'm just grabbing the tambourine with these two, with the thumb and with just my index finger. As for the softest of the excerpts. And now the opposite, the crescendo on Carnival Overture. I'm just gonna start right after the second ending. You don't need to hear the beginning again. So let's see. So let's see. I hope that was clear enough and you could see how I'm doing these things. I hope the microphone wasn't getting on the way of the visual aspect. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the metronome as well. A lot of these excerpts are they have tempo changes. Carnival Overture is one of them that has tempo changes, and we live, in a world of technology these days. This is what makes the Percussion Conservatory possible, right? So along with that, we have so many different apps for metronomes, and a lot of them you are able to pre-program. You can program accelerandos. You can program retardandos. You can program sudden tempo changes. Take advantage of that. The way I like to approach an excerpt like Carnival, in which you have towards the end of the excerpt tempo change like that. I'm pulling it up here from a letter right at letter W, which says poco piumoso. It's the first thing that I'll do is, I want to know what my target tempo is, right? Once I've chosen that target tempo, I practice that passage over and over at that tempo, right? I already know which tempo I was coming from since the letter T, right? And so I practice letter T at that tempo. After I'm comfortable with both, that's when I try to put them together. And I program how many. Where do I want to start? Do I want to start at T? Do I want to start? On the next phrase before U, and then go all the way to the end? And then keeping that in mind, the number of measures, you count the number of measures, so that you can program that tempo change exactly where it needs to happen. Listen to it a couple times, get it in your head, and then start practicing the excerpt that way. If I have, for example, if I play letter U, I know that I want, on Carnival Overture, I know that I want approximately 10 to 12 clicks of tempo change in that. And I have programmed my metronome before, but I know that this switch before W is going to be automatic. I'm just going to start 4 before W. Anyway, I just wanted to demonstrate that sudden tempo change, and I have so many examples of these little tempo changes that I have on my metronome. If anybody's interested, I use Tempo Advance. I think it's about $5, which beats the $120 that's a Dr. B, which I have also back there. Always good to have that reference as well, a referral to the doctor. But a lot of excerpts that I practice that incorporate tempo changes, and it just makes it so much easier. It makes it easier to practice the end of going to, speaking of Glockenspiel, for example, the end of Pines of Rome that has that accelerando, that gradual accelerando. You just follow the metronome and then, record yourself, listen back and see if it sounds natural and organic. If not, maybe you need to, fix it a little bit or program it in a different way. But 'cause obviously, it's not just about following the machine. It's not only about following that to perfection. It's about it sounding naturally good. But it's the tool to do it, and to leave no question about it. So that about covers what I had just one little comment precisely about the Nutcracker. One of the most interesting excerpts is the Arabian Dance, right? Ta, 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 ta. When you look at an original score, it says with the thumb, which it has really the copyist did the like divided in 30-second notes. Who knows what happened there? Why does it say with the thumb if you have 30-second notes that are so slow? Was it supposed to be a roll? Do we hear any 30-second notes like that in Middle Eastern music? These are all questions that unfortunately we won't be able to ask Tchaikovsky himself. But we can take our guesses, and it is what it is. Nowadays, it is played as 30-second notes, and that's how it needs to be played. In audition, don't go and play a roll. Play 30-second notes. So for that one, I also do like getting playing on an instrument that has a little more of a different sound, and I've used different things throughout the years, including this little guy here. Another cheap tambourine, just this was about $5. Steel jingles, and I put a single brass jingle from that Minor tambourine. That Minor tambourine was about $35. Which actually reminds me, I never finished answering that question about the instruments, the question that I was asked previously. So as far as buying cheaper instruments, yes, I mean, any instrument is better than no instrument, and there are plenty of instruments that are not the usual brands we hear for these tambourines, that are not Grover or Harlan or Black Swamp, that sound fantastic. Case in point, these Minors, I have like 3 of them, and I've actually also used them in the orchestra. They sound great. And yeah, like I think when I bought them, they were about $30. They may be a little more expensive now, but my guessing is it's not gonna be $150. So that's absolutely and totally okay. When I was probably 11 or 12 years old, I was using in the Children Orchestra of Panama, which is this is where I'm originally from. Josh mentioned earlier. I would play on a headless tambourine. I mean, it was better than not playing the tambourine at all. So yeah, any instrument is better than no instrument. And as long as you're getting the techniques correctly, you can still develop your role. You can still develop all your basic techniques. If it's a headless tambourine, I guess you can develop your finger roll, but you can essentially be able to do everything else. And I believe the first part of the question was about the heads on the tambourine, and I'm imagining it refers to either playing a synthetic head or a natural head. This is also going to depend on your personal preference and what do you use a tambourine for. I know a lot of people that own tambourines with synthetic heads and get fabulous results. I personally don't own any, and I simply haven't gone out of my way to buy one of those, or to put a synthetic head on any of the tambourines that I own. But yeah, it's worth exploring. I mean, I've seen and heard a lot of people with tambourines with synthetic heads that sound absolutely spectacular. It's really more about the jingles themselves and the drum than about the head. But I've never made a tambourine, so it's just an opinion that I have, not based in any experience making a drum. So yeah, I believe this about covers the techniques that I wanted to talk about today. And please, if anybody else has more questions, let me know, and yeah, drop them in the chat.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. Please, we are definitely wrapping up the class, so if you have those lurking questions, if you have those burning questions, now is definitely the time to ask before we let Pedro get back on to being the all-star percussionist that he is and get on with his day. But we do have time here, so if anybody is thinking about asking a question, and we do have one, which is fantastic. It is good afternoon, Pedro. What's the ideal time to practice each percussion instrument? And how do we choose tambourine by the different tone colors? Could you maybe clarify the question to the asker? When you say When you're saying what's the ideal time to practice, do you mean like the time of day, or do you mean like the time in your practice schedule, or like time of the week? Maybe you could follow up a little bit about that. And then maybe Pedro, you could jump in on how do we choose a tambourine by different tone colors? And then we have another question. Can you talk a little bit about muffling or not muffling the tambourine? I'm assuming they mean on the head.
Right. So about choosing a tambourine, which I think I remember it was part of also that previous question. Um, well, like I mentioned earlier, out here I have one, two, three, four, five, six, seven tambourines with me, and down at the hall in Indianapolis, I have several more. Um, Ideally, I try to get a tambourine, first of all, that I personally like the sound. Like I said earlier, I tend to gravitate towards silver, and then combinations of silver and something else. I try to find tambourines that have different pitches, different different brightnesses, different levels of sustain, and then basically listen to the piece a lot. Listen to different recordings, especially if it's a piece sort of like I don't know, like Capricho Español by Rizzi-Korsakov. There are so many recordings out there, like professional recordings. There's YouTube, and see if what do you find that you like the best, and then if you have access to a drum, to an instrument that has a similar sound, then great, try it out. Try different instruments. Try to see if if you're playing, if the general playing is very high on the register, maybe you want to complement that with instrument that is bright, or if it's very, or maybe you want to contrast that with an instrument that is low, right? Um, for example, the lowest tambourine in terms of pitch, timbre that I have is that Harlan, and I remember using it for the soft tambourine section in the Rite of Spring, and I thought that nothing beats that. It's so like it has so much body. Let me just pull that tambourine a little bit and play it. My Harlan is also a silver tambourine, but yeah, it's such a low pitch. As compared to they both have silver in them, but they're treated differently. The jingles are different sizes, and the size of the shell is different. The thickness of the head, that all goes into influence the sound and the timbre of the drum. But essentially, um, have an idea for sound in your head. You don't need to have a sound concept in your head about the sound that you want for a particular piece or a particular excerpt if you have access to different drums. And then ask questions. Ask your colleagues, do you think they sound good? Do you think it would be better with a different instrument? Ask for their opinion. I mean, everybody has their opinion, and in terms of these things that are subjective, to be honest, that means that every opinion is valid. Muffling, I mentioned it a little bit at the beginning of the class. I do muffle my tambourines, and it's on a case-by-case basis. Some tambourines I'll put more muffling than others. I just want to put enough so that I can still hear the drum resonate, but I'm getting rid of the unwanted overtones that come with the drum head. So a lot of people have different techniques or different ways of muffling their tambourines. What I do is I usually try to grab a piece of lightweight cloth, like a fleece blanket, for example, or a tiny little piece of moleskin, in which I put the soft side, in contact with that drum head. So if it's a piece of moleskin, I'm not gonna put the adhesive side on the drum head, but the soft side. and then I put it there. I with a piece of tape. Any this particular one is duct tape. In other drums, I have masking tape. On this Harlan is a tiny little piece of moleskin with masking tape all around it. Uh, this soft tambourine I have, this is actually a towel. I cut it definitely larger. I wasn't getting the sound I wanted with a smaller muffling. And yeah, once again, masking tape around it. Um, I've seen a lot of comments or a lot of people saying, well, you buy a tambourine that's $200. Why do you want to put a bunch of tape around it? Well, why not? It doesn't matter if it's $1,000. If there's a sound or particular sound that I don't like or that I don't want in there, I'm gonna get rid of it, and I'm gonna fix it and mess with it until I get what I wanted for the instrument that I paid for, right? And that's the bottom line. Hopefully that answers all those questions, and I think the only thing that was left was about the time of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. And they have clarified that the question is how much time in a day, or how many hours should we practice in a day? And I have my answer, which is that it's more about the quality of your practice than the quantity of your practice. And something specifically for tambourine, I would say, it's a big instrument, and we have to spend a lot of time on it. Pedro, you've spent I don't even want to think how many hours in my life I've spent playing tambourine. It's too many to count. And if you're not, if you're not in love with the idea of becoming a percussionist, like if you're practicing tambourine for an hour and all of a sudden you start to feel really disinterested, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that, but you should know this might be a difficult career path for you, because these instruments all take massive amounts of dedication. So, but Pedro, that's my answer about this. You can do it really. You can pack it into a short amount of time if you're super focused. But I would love to hear your thoughts on this, Pedro.
Yeah, so how many hours should you practice? It all depends. It all depends what your ultimate goal is. If you wanna play in an orchestra, if you wanna win an audition, you're gonna have to practice a lot. I mean, when I'm preparing for an audition, if I have 10, 12 hours a day to practice, that's what I do. And if I have nothing else in the day, or if I can move appointments or errands, and to if things can wait days or weeks, I postpone things and dedicate as much time as possible to practicing. Yeah, hours and hours. I think my record is probably about 10 hours, not more than that. But in on average, I would say, if it's for something like that, a recital, a solo recital, an audition, 5 6 hours a day on average, it's probably a solid amount of time. Like Josh said, yeah, you can condense it. You can be on schedule if you want to perhaps have a longer preparation but shorter hours. That will work for you. You have to find what your limits are. If your objective is not to win an audition and become an orchestral percussionist, um, that yeah, it's fine. I mean, practice tambourine or practice any instrument for that matter until you feel that you are in a decent place, a place where you want to be. It's up to your personal goals and your personal objectives, and all of it is okay. I mean, there's there should be no the measure of your success in a musical career is not based upon how many auditions you've won or how many there are several paths. There are several different paths, and every path is not for everybody. So it's up to you to choose your one. There are so many amazing, unbelievable players that have never won an audition, and that's okay. So, and that doesn't mean that they haven't spent hours after hours after hours of practicing. uh, it's it's one of those things. I was talking to a friend about a month ago, and I'm like, you know what, I've had my share of success, and can I pinpoint exactly how I did it, and repeat it every time? No. That's why I've taken tons of auditions, and I haven't won every single one of them. So I've won, actually, compared to how many I've taken, not very many. So and I think that's true for most of us. So it's about being patient, being persevering, and all that. But it may not happen, and your success should not be measured by that.
Wise words. These are very, very wise words, guys. Please take them to heart. And this is going to be the final question for the day. Pedro, do you still have time? You
Yeah, of
good?
course.
Okay, awesome. This is the last one. Um, which snare exercises or etudes would you recommend to practice tambourine outside of the excerpts? So Pedro mentioned stick control so far, and he showed the famous drum set book that he was working out of. Do you have any others, Pedro?
Yeah, I've experienced a little bit with practicing out of the Keith Leo book for accessories. I've practiced a fair share of Delacluse as well on the tambourine. The issue I have with practicing Delacluse on the tambourine is that it is not gonna work out 100% like he intended.
Mm.
And sure, yes, it is. Well, it is of good value to practice any of those exercises and try to get as much dexterity and ease in playing as you can. But I also think we should not go overboard with it. For my personal purposes of tambourine, I like to essentially limit it to stick control and then create my own exercises. Record myself to see if particular figures that I'm playing are, placed in the way that I want to place them. That a figure like I spoke earlier, that sounds exactly like that instead of like a cumbia. It shouldn't be a cumbia. It's so when you play cumbia, you play cumbia. That's fine. But if it's not that, then play play it a little more straighter, I guess, right? So yeah, I'm sorry I don't have any like, oh, you go to this book and it's amazing. It's not what I have done. I've experienced with some of that, but uh did not serve the purpose that I was looking for.
Fantastic. And we do actually have one. This one's really short. Last question. Are there any other techniques, such as like playing pandero, that you would need to have success in the orchestra, or as long as you're comfortable playing traditional tambourine techniques, is that enough or okay?
I feel that as long as you have all your basic techniques, standard ones for orchestral playing down, it should be enough. You don't need to go out of your way to learn pandero, although that never hurts. I can only do very little. I played like 3 pandero gigs in my life, and I got it so that I could get that basic with both hands going. But that's about it, and I've never used it in an orchestral setting. I know other people that have, and that they sound absolutely fantastic. And so it's really up to you. If you find that helps your playing, and that creates a certain ease, then go for it.
And I would just, yeah, you're 100% on the money. And I would add to that it's a long journey as a percussionist. And Pedro and I will both tell you that just because, you get your job, and we do feel confident, everyone who's watching these streams, that it is possible for everyone. If you're really dedicated to it, you do it a long time. There is a pathway in classical percussion for those of us who are very serious and dedicated. I mean, this is a nearly 2 hour stream. You guys are still here listening. You're in it, right? I mean, you're here for the right reasons. So, don't forget that there will be time to learn other things after you're employed too. So my advice would be, focus on the things, like Pedro said earlier, choose your goals very wisely. Know what your goals are. Be very intentional with your goals. So if your goal is to get into an orchestra and there's not Pandero playing on the auditions that you're seeing, which I've never seen an audition that had Pandero playing, in my personal experience. I have internationally never seen a single one. That's probably not the best way to spend your time early on in your career. That being said, you get your orchestra position, you pass your tenure review, or you pass your probation period, and you fall in love with the Pandero, or you fall in love with darbuka or djembe, or any hand drum, or you get really into jazz vibraphone or drum set or anything. Piano. I mean, there are lots of people who get into composing. It doesn't even have to be instrumental or conducting. People will be percussionists for a few years and then decide, hey, I want to try my hand at conducting, and they take a completely different career path. So it's really all, like Pedro had mentioned, it's really all about setting your goals, having very intentional goals, and then practicing every day very specifically with the plan to achieve your goal. So when you're talking about how many hours in a day, it's like, or do I need to play Pandero? It's like, well, do you want to play in an orchestra in 6 months or 16 years or not at all, right? These are very different things. If you want to get from where you are to playing in an orchestra, in 6 months, unless you're already in an orchestra, or even like me, like even if you're already in an orchestra, that can be very difficult, right? Just because of what Pedro said. It's not always up to you. Sometimes you just go and you play your best and you wait for these things to happen, but you want to spend as much time as you can trying to achieve that goal. So just depending on these things, that's sort of that's my very long answer to a short.
Yeah, I mean, you're exactly right. I mean, I'll add that, sure, if there is a stretch of 6-8 months in which there's no auditions happening, anything like that, and you want to play Pandero, hey, sure, dedicate half hour, an hour a day to it. Why not? Besides here, But once you get into a prep for a particular goal, a recital, or a audition, and anything like that, then your focus needs to be redirected into what is going to help you get that position.
That's absolutely right. Well, guys, and on that note, let's all, from our computers, let's all give Pedro a round of applause. This was really, really intriguing and an exciting class. It was very thoughtful and methodical, the way you basically took us from the like you said in the class, like you would in your trailer. You said, I'm going to take you from literally the most basic to very advanced techniques. And to get that all into just an hour and 45 minutes is very impressive, and we covered a lot of materials. And guys, if you missed part of the class, if you showed up late, don't worry, it has been recorded, and in the next few days it'll be up on our website. And if you do have any further questions for Pedro or for me or about the conservatory, please feel free to email us anytime, and I'll relay your message to Pedro. It's hello@thepercussionconservatory.com. And on that, again, thank you so much for being here, Pedro. It's really a pleasure and an honor to have you be featured with us on our artist roster as part of the Percussion Conservatory, and I hope that we can do many more so that everyone can learn more from you.
Absolutely. It has been a pleasure. Thanks for the invitation. Thanks for creating this platform. I mean, it's really unique, and it's very special, and great place for all these things to happen and have just widespread access to it.
Yeah, I really appreciate you saying that, and that is exactly what it is. It's about access. So guys, And if you don't have the ability, as I said before, to make a donation, it's totally fine. It would really help us. And I already see them coming through Instagram and Facebook. Share this with everyone you know. You know, everyone needs to see what Pedro just did here. And it helps so much. You guys have no idea. When you guys are the ones sharing and commenting and tagging people, your friends learn about it, and then their friends learn about it. It's amazing how these things can just take off. So this, I mean, it's really rallying behind an amazing community already of everyone who's getting involved, and just go ahead and shout it from the mountaintops, and we'll do lots more of them. But guys, that was Techniques for the Titans with Pedro Fernandez, and until next time, have a great morning, noon, or night wherever you are. And take care. Thanks again, Pedro.
Thank you.
All right. Good night, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.